Welcome everyone to this episode of A Story Always, in which we have the great pleasure of having with us Brie Beau Sheldon. How are you, Brie? How are you doing?
Excited to be here.
Thanks a lot. We are very excited to have you as well. Um, so, for those of you out there who don't know Brie or some of their work, they are the owners of the amazing RPG blog Thoughtly, one of the 5 or so questions series, and as well as the Approachable Theory series. They're the creators of the Script Change RPG Toolbox, which I've used a few times and I really recommend checking out. Uh, they are the host and writer of the Leading with Class YouTube series, a YouTube series of videos about learning uh, about being a leader using RPGs, which is a really cool idea. And they're the designers of the award-nominated Let Me Take a Selfie, as well as contributors to a vast array of games in different, like all kinds of roles, like such. And they've worked with like the Halcyon City Herald Collection for Bubblegumshoe, No Country for Old Kobolds, Off the Woods, Lonely Games, and they not so long ago they kickstarted a e-sign called Behind the Masc about RPG and masculinity from a non-binary point of view. And also for some time now they've been working on a new and exciting game called Turn, will be going to Kickstarter very soon, and about which we'll be talking about today. So to begin with, I want to remind everyone that if you are in the chat while we are live, if you're seeing this in YouTube later, I'm sorry you missed it, but if you are here right now, you can leave questions on the chat, and I'll try to be on the lookout for them and bring them to Brie if I can. But to start, could you tell us a little bit about Turn? Give us a quick pitch of the game.
Sure. So Turn is a slice of life supernatural role-playing game about shapeshifters in small rural towns that focuses on quiet drama in the lives of shapeshifters who must balance their beast and human identities while finding community in their town and alongside other shifters.
Cool. I'm going to leave all the links to Bree's like different stuff on the chat, and you'll be able to find that in the description of the video once it goes up. So talking about Turn, to get an idea, where did the idea for Turn came from?
So I'd been playing a couple of different games. I was relatively new to the indie scene, and I played Monster Hearts, and like there were a lot of cool elements of the game, and yet I still like found myself wanting, like there was something not quite there. So I took a pretty significant amount of time and kind of took apart like both the mechanics and the narrative and the structure of Monster Hearts and some other similar games to see what I could find from it and what it meant to me. And what ended up coming out of it is that I was looking for this like quieter kind of like storytelling and like a more slice of life experience with less extreme drama. And that I still wanted genre stuff. So like I wanted shapeshifters because there's a lot of what I like about shapeshifters. And I also wanted it to be in small towns specifically because I think it's a nice microcosm to explore. So it basically came out of frustration, I guess, and wanting to tell a story that that satisfied my needs as a player.
Yeah, and I think that's a pretty common occurrence of being frustrated. I don't know if frustrated, but finding that a game is not exactly what you're looking for and wanting to do it yourself.
Yeah, definitely.
And this process of analyzing Monster Hearts and similar games, was this you've talked about this process of destructive design? Was it where you applied that kind of philosophy, and could you tell us a little bit about how it works?
Yeah, sure. So this was destructive design, and the way that generally works is you take mechanics, games, ideas, and break them down into like bullet point lists almost. Sometimes just in your head, but sometimes on paper too. And find like the elements of it and how they make you feel, and you know how they work together, and how they fall apart whenever you take out certain pieces. And so that's like kind of where I found out that I didn't really like just the exclusive 2d6 dice rolling mechanic, and I wanted to have an added die that would change the probability for sacrifice of stress, and stuff like that. Like you kind of tear stuff apart to find the meat in it, and that's what I did with it.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I believe you have a blog post about this in your blog.
Yeah.
So yeah, I recommend you check it out. That's part of the Approachable Theory series, if I'm correct.
Yes.
So yeah, I recommend people to check it out as well. I found it really interesting.
Oh, thank you.
So one of the main themes or main objectives of the games you were talking about is this idea of the drama of everyday lives, a more quiet drama, but not less intense just because of that. What do you find meaningful, interesting in this kind of stories, and how does the game help the players create them?
So I think that everyday lives are the key to like a really interesting story a lot of the time. It's like the little things, like our obligations and our priorities and what we sacrifice just to get by every day. Those kind of things that seem just kind of just a part of the story and accepted a lot of the time, I like to explore and like see where their failing points are and where they can be bolstered. And I've played a lot of games with these very big overarching plots and legendary stories. But with Turn, like sometimes it's just nice to like realize that somebody just actually has something they care about that they do every day, like maybe grabbing a sandwich for their dad to take to work every day or something like that, because their dad was someone who always gave to them. So I think that there's little bits and pieces of story in all of our lives, and I think sometimes they get missed whenever we focus on the high drama of, you know, the like murder and bloodshed and horror, you know, like, and there's definitely, you know, risk for big bad things to happen, you know, in all parts of life, people die and their struggle. But I think that it's been really enjoyable to me to explore like the little pieces of people's lives through Turn.
And do you find that it kind of changes a lot the way you experience a game, searching for those kind of specific pieces of drama? Has it bring you something new and different?
I think it really has. By focusing on like the smaller, I guess, like everyday stuff, I've had the opportunity to explore characters more deeply, and like getting into the towns that you build in the game can be like just really fulfilling, because you like find all the nooks and crannies of where secrets are held. And that's like, I don't know, whenever you're so worried about like the next big bad coming up on the horizon, which is not really a thing in Turn, like in other games, whenever you're so focused on that, sometimes you miss like the things that are happening between each other and like the community and everything. And I've just, it's kind of taken a turn of how I approach it, I think. Really did not intend that pun.
But it was really a really good one. So, so talking about one of the main characteristics of the game, the shapeshifters. What do you find appealing about the nature of the shapeshifter? I'm not going to get it right. Shapeshifters.
So shapeshifters or shifters, we all have kind of secret identities, I think, a lot of the time. There's something about us that we keep hidden from the rest of the world. And some of what shapeshifters are about to me are like the parts of my identity that like are layered and complex. Because so I have bipolar disorder, which means I am depressed sometimes, and I'm kind of middling sometimes, and I'm kind of manic sometimes. And So the ideas of like werewolves and people who have like these two polar opposite or maybe just completely different kind of things that like they live as their identity really appealed to me growing up. So I've always kind of been into the concept. But as an adult, especially, a lot of it is just like, people have more than just what they show to the world. And maybe sometimes the other side of them is the part that they like better or that they struggle with. And it's, to me, I think exploring that in games is really exciting.
And why did you decide to disassociate the shapeshifters in the game for any kind of real life myths or legends there that could be inspired from?
So a large part of the reason why I did that is because the majority of the people who play my games are white people, and that they have a tendency to appropriate when they do that. And I always fear somebody like being at a con and amazingly playing my game somehow, and someone walking up just in time to hear them say something appropriative or terrible. And I was like, with shapeshifters, that risk is huge because a lot of mythological background and legends and stuff have some deep importance to people that have to do with shapeshifters, and I don't want that to be abused. But it's also, I really wanted people to be original with how they explored it. Like, maybe try and think away from the fiction and the stories that you've heard before, and, approach shifters from a way that makes sense to you organically. And we've had some really fun stuff. Like, we've had shifters that can see each other's auras projected on themselves whenever they are trying to identify each other in a crowd. And shifters that like don't have like a really like scary forced change kind of experience. It's just kind of a smooth like sigh into being their other form. And yeah, I don't know, like, I think that it's so interesting to get that like different perspective, like that different background.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. Another important characteristics of the shapeshifters, and I think the game as a whole that I was really interested by, is that in this game, by default, when a shapeshifter attempts something, whatever, they succeed. And the game is more about the consequences of their actions. Could you tell us a little bit more why did you decide to do that? What are the consequences in the game? How it refocuses the stories we tell with it?
So whenever you are playing games and you have superpowers, sometimes failing sounds silly. Like it feels to me kind of pointless, and the less interesting option. And so while as shapeshifters in turn, like sometimes your identity does get you in trouble, it causes you problems that is difficult for you. You also do have superpowers, like you have super strength and regeneration and super senses, and a super appetite to go along with it. But if you can do things like that, like why would you struggle really? So the real struggle tends to be between your identities, finding that balance of making sure that you're satisfying both the beast and human within you. And so that's why I chose to make it introspective rather than an external battle. So you just do what you want to do, but everything has consequences, and we can't forget that. So unless you get like an exceedingly good roll and you just happen to be going along with like what both sides of your identity want to do in certain situations, you're going to have consequences for your actions that make sense and will come back to you.
And how do you think that alters the normal play experience? Does it focus the story in different ways? Changes the story a lot?
It's kind of funny because what I tend to notice is that people. So one of the main mechanics are called struggles, and they are basically where you roll the 2d6, sometimes +1, And this is when your human side and your beast side are in disagreement about what you're doing, basically, or when they're coming to conflict. You struggle, and you roll a die, and then kind of tally up your consequences for your actions. And like when people reach this point where they're struggling between their sides, it's sometimes silly things. Like, I want to eat this rabbit so bad because I'm a hungry wolf, right? Like that like anger of like, get the rabbit. And the human in you is like, could we have a salad? Like, could we please have a salad with some goat cheese, because this is just not my thing. And you wouldn't think that would be like a big thing, but also like interpersonal conflicts become where like the real like biggest, I think, debate comes, because there are two of the struggles. One of them is mind your manners, and the other one is be understood. And the first is in human form, and the second is in beast form. And whenever you're trying to like basically like tell people how you feel about things, or like maybe tell lies or be super honest or something like that, all of these things, you end up struggling with your other side, because beasts are very blunt and honest and to the point, while humans are very like kind of cagey and want to be polite and not offend people. And it like those two struggles are just constantly being used. And it's wonderful because you actually end up getting the action, kind of the like mechanical action, turns into the everyday thing of interacting with other people.
Yeah, I see what you get. Yeah, it creates the drama, creates in those small decisions, the small interactions become like a huge deal of balancing your two natures. That's really cool. So talking about those two sides of the character, how do you represent their different interests and motivations and that relationship among them?
So you actually have two character sheets in the game. You have a human role, which has your kind of background and identity questions about who you are as like a person. And it includes your goals, which are what you basically what you do to advance. But they really speak a lot of meaning into them, kind of giving you like why you're doing stuff is like your motivations. And you also have your like some basic abilities and an advanced ability that you can get. And on the beast sheet, you have other goals that are totally different. And you have powers and a description, and they will point away from each other sometimes, and sometimes they sync up nicely. But the goals and like the way you approach things with your powers and abilities can really influence how people play. The human goals, you basically they're supposed to be accomplished over a little bit longer period of time, and they get renewed as like new goals whenever you finish one. And then the beast ones are just recurring every season. You have 4 different goals for each season, and the constant like kind of conflict between those needs and everything that come up in your goals, because the beast goals are things like find a den for the winter, eat something, and stuff like that. But the human ones are like help 2 people come to an agreement from 2 different bloodlines and stuff like that, that like it really forces people to kind of make decisions that like line up by taking their time. And time is really important in the game. Like everything takes time.
Oh, is there some kind of mechanical implementation of time passing and you don't having time for doing something or something like that?
Yeah, actually. So basically every season is based on the number of goals completed by players. So like a certain number of players complete goals and the season changes.
Okay.
And the season changes whether you've accomplished what you plan to do or not. And like narratively, you kind of just work that out. It's not something that I've ever been like, well, no, you don't accomplish what you want to. You do. It just, now it's the next season and you're still finishing it up. Is kind of how it goes. Because you use progress bars as the town manager to like record people's progress to various like complicated goals. So anything to be accomplished in a scene, you accomplish in the scene. If it's something more complex, like convincing a whole group of people of something, or maybe like relocating your entire den, it might take a couple of bars on a progress bar. And so the combination of the progress bars and the changing seasons means sometimes you had something important that you were working on, and now it's not done, and the season has changed. You'll still get it done, but it might have, you know, an interesting story to it for why it panned out the way it did.
Yeah, that's really nice. And I like that it's kind of like simple to keep track, because when I try to keep like that detailed track of time passing in a game, I can't, like.
No, it's just a matter of a number of people, you know, basically accomplishing goals, and then you're like, okay, the next session will be changing into the next season.
That's really nice. That's really cool. And the process of transforming, I don't know what's the terminology you use for the shapeshifters. Does it have any kind of mechanical relevance? Does it have any like significance in the story? How can it like affect the characters?
So everyone can turn whenever they want. I either call it turning or shifting normally. But there is a catch. Whenever certain things happen in game, like if you have consequences for a struggle, or you use the turn die, you accrue something called stress. And this is accrued in each of your forms. You have 2 different bars to track it. And when you hit the end of one of your bars, like one of your tracks, you are forced to turn. And so it's important to note that in turn, you always have full control of your actions. Like anything you do is your choice. You have full agency, but your body does sometimes change, and it will change from one form to the other if you get too stressed out. And that means you're stuck until someone comforts you, or you prioritize yourself to find comfort in yourself. And that can be a really stressful experience. We've had people stuck in their form and completely freaking out because they can't communicate to like mundanes what's going on because it's a secret. But like, it's really hard for a cougar to use a cell phone. So I actually had one of my character, Beau, who I'm playing in a really long campaign that we've been playing. It's like a year long. He got himself stuck, like stressed out, and force turned into his cougar form. And thank goodness that he'd come out to like his best friend and like told him that he was a cougar, because otherwise he would have never been able to get a hold of his friends and tell them to come help him. And he'd have been stuck for like days. Because he was just freaking out so bad he couldn't think straight. So like shifters can communicate directly between each other in different forms. And the reason why transformation is so important is because it's something that you can control until you don't take care of yourself. And whenever you don't take care of yourself and you overdo it and you push yourself too hard, eventually you just overload.
Yeah.
And like, we all, I think, have had moments in our lives where we just pushed ourselves a little too much. We got too stressed out. And like that, it's kind of murder. Like, it's really bad to do that to yourself all the time. And so that's part of why like finding community with other shifters so you have trust and can be comforted by them is really important in the game.
Yeah, and I can totally see that. Like, I can relate to that feeling of, like, at some point of my life, I've been like planning ahead for this kind of thing, like knowing, okay, this day I'm definitely going to not be able to do anything, so not planning anything for that day, and the rest of the time try to be like a responsible human being, and then something comes up, you waste your energy, you get stressed out, and you're like, oh shit, now it happens before I expected.
Yeah, and it's the thing is, it's amazing to me that it's like just like that in the game. Is like you can get stressed out by the same kind of thing that like a normal person would get stressed out by. Like I've had characters who are just like into crazy of social situations, like where like they were at the grocery store and somebody was annoying them and they were trying to be polite and they couldn't accomplish it, so they were just like a jerk, and then they got stressed out, and it's just like it feels very stressful in the moment, but I guess in retrospect, it's much less stressful than like fighting zombies. So it's just a very different kind of experience.
Yeah, but it's real, and I really like that the way to getting out of it is like interacting with people, getting comfort, because that's also like real, and very important for people to think about and take care of themselves in that way. You've talked a little bit about it, but what is the relationship among the shapeshifters themselves? Is it different to how they interact with normal people, normies? I don't know what you call them.
I call them mundanes.
Okay.
And so there are shapeshifters that like you establish like how common shapeshifters are in your town,
Mm-hmm.
and you establish whether they have a formal culture and everything. This is all done by the players at the table in the first session. Like you figure out like, do they like have rules? Do they have an organization of any kind, or are they just kind of people in the town and things like that? And the one rule is that all of the shapeshifters, like that you're playing, all your PCs are people who know each other.
Mm-hmm.
You have relationships, you build those as part of the start of game. And they are sometimes kind of negative, sometimes pretty positive.
Mm-hmm.
But it really depends on how you approach it. I personally always encourage people to lean towards a slightly positive approach. But in general, like with each other as PCs, you should have like some sort of kind of not hateful relationship going on, anywhere up to like best friends. And the rest of the shifters in the town, it depends on the answers to your questions, as well as how you seek to approach, other shifters in the town. Because if there's a formal culture, that's already established some of how you're going to have relationships with people. But if you decide there isn't, then maybe you're just kind of like loosely a bunch of people who have these powers who live in the same town. Maybe you know each other, maybe you don't, because like you don't always have to know who other shifters are. And that can make it a very, very interesting and very compelling experience to find out that other people are like you. But maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's a rough thing.
Yeah.
But I think that they have a similarity with each other that they don't have with mundanes. And so like sometimes like they maybe don't always relate to human people the same. Like whenever they're just talking strictly to mundanes. And mundane animals and mundane humans have different interactions with shifters too, because mundane animals might view them as threats and stuff like that. And because it is first and foremost a secret, that you keep, and you can choose to tell people over time sometimes, but it can have consequences. So they're careful about it. And I think that, like the shifters, like they have a very different kind of relationship that's unique to their experience.
That's really cool. And talking a little bit about the concept of the small town, the town where the game takes place in, What do you find? What do you find in small towns? I guess particularly in the USA, interesting as a setting for the game. How are they different from other places?
So I love small towns in the US.
Mm-hmm.
While they have often problems, they often have a lot of nice stuff about them.
Mm.
I personally grew up in a couple of different small towns over my childhood and teenage years. And the things that I found out about them is they have a different kind of community than I've found in suburban places and that I've heard of in urban places. And so all of this is all based on my experience. Like I did some research, but like it is all going to be colored by my own experience. I'm not an objective creator with this game. So like there's stuff that you like the quiet that you get in small towns is unique. That it's different. And I don't know how it compares maybe to like small towns in other countries as much. But like in my experience, the like woods of my childhood in Pennsylvania had a different kind of quiet than the streets of the like Irish towns that I've been to that were full of musicians playing music, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember when I was when I was young, I did live in a small town, and I remember the first time I went and slept in like in someone else's house in a big city. I wasn't able to sleep because of the noise outside. Now I think I become used to, but back then I could tell the difference.
I'm one of these people who like I'm fine with noise like 90% of the time, but every so often like something goes off in my brain and I'm like I need to go to like the middle of nowhere just for a little bit and just have some quiet because that peace is something that I just cannot find. Like there's constant noise where I live. We live in a quiet neighborhood and it's still constantly noisy. So like even just the power lines can be oppressive. And so I thought about that a lot, you know, like how there's like a bit of an isolation aspect to small towns where like you can get away to have time to de-stress where you might not be able to do that in a city. Like I can't imagine being a shapeshifter with a stress track in a city. It would possibly be the worst thing ever. So like that's one of those factors too. But also like the culture is different. Like people judge people for weird things and accept people who have weirder things. So like the prejudice level of a small town is a moving target. And some of that is like you can make small towns of a lot of different demographics and makeups and stuff in the US. Like I chose the US in part because while plenty of other small towns in other countries are interested and I'm exploring investigating those for things, I think that you can do so much just in the US with what I give that like it gives you time to try and explore and see how people live differently even whenever they're next to somebody who is completely different than them.
And how does the game kind of help players convey that feeling of a small town, the association of that of being in that particular kind of community?
So the first thing you do in game is you actually design your town. You make a town map that has themes, bloodlines, locations, and events. And all of these are kind of mapped out and like relevance to the town itself and each other as aspects and elements. And there are a couple of different types of towns you choose from, like college town, tourist town, industrial town, and stuff. And you build this town together as a group, everyone contributing a little bit for each part. And I love the like way the towns come out as being so unique and interesting. And like everybody knows everybody seems to know a little bit about small towns whenever they play the game. Like they're like, oh, that totally makes sense. I can do something with that. And they make people become real just by putting their names on the map. Like it's you get such a sense of what the town is like just by saying, well, it's a town that has wealth really close to the town, but poverty connected to the town and really distant. So they're like some poor people, but it's probably influenced by the wealthy people being there. And then there's this family. They're the only Vietnamese family in town, but they've been here for like 3 generations, and they're one of the most prominent shapeshifter families. And it's very like, we had an event that was 13 dead, no one speaks of it, right? And as we went through building the town and everything, there were like all these legends that we started mentioning that had to relate to it, and how like they're obviously like this was the origin of the reason why shapeshifters don't want to be exposed and stuff like that. And everything connects really well, and like small town connections, like things interlock like crazy. And so it was really like, over the times we built towns for this game, like play testing and games at home and everything, people like they make where they live like so deeply. Like they find all of the themes that mean a lot to them and that they want to explore. That control over the town building. I think it's just something really, really important.
Yeah, I think big towns, big modern towns, can be like everything at once. That's really hard to focus on just something and really define them. But a small town, it can actually have like a very defined personality, and that's really cool. That's really interesting to explore.
Yeah, I actually personally have just built so many towns myself because it's one of my favorite parts of the game. And like when we were doing the Kickstarter video, we ran through creating a town, and by the end of it, all of us were just like, oh my gosh, why aren't we actually playing this right now? Like, it's so good because it is really fun and it feels real. Like, it always feels like just it could be there on the map in real life.
That's really cool. And what role does the shapeshifters play in their communities? How do they interact with the town? How does the town affect them?
It's actually pretty like complex. It depends on like how it somewhat on the questions, like how you respond to them at the start of the game, and somewhat on your characters themselves, like how you create them. Because some people like to make characters that are a little more introspective and stuff, but you find that as part of the town, and with the way like the town manager kind of influences people to, make their choices and do things, they kind of have to interact with the town. Like, family members will call, community members will check in on you, like things like that. You can't escape fully from the fact that you are part of the community. And the shapeshifters are sometimes guarded because they're, keeping a pretty big secret. But some of them also like really want to have an important role in the town. Like, we have 2 characters trying to run for mayor in one of our games. And like being mayor as a shapeshifter, like, it's pretty big deal, right? But they want it as characters. Like, they decided that's the passion, because your human roles really drive you to a specific kind of, story. So like we have like the organizer, who's really big on like getting things together and coordinating people and stuff like that. We also have the lover, who just wants someone else to be with. And these different priorities, they're real life things, and the town is real life. So people will interact with, the humans by trying to just live a human life and benefit from human comforts, satisfy their needs. And with the town itself, with animals, There's the reality that some of the beasts hunt for other animals, and some of them have other animal groups that are made up of mundane animals. So like wolves have packs, otters have romps, bisons have herds, and stuff like that. And like even the raven that has a flock, they are together a lot of the time, and they interact, and you name some of the members of your animal groups as well, just like you have NPCs. So everyone does have 2 NPCs who are mundanes, who do not know that the character is a shifter. And so they have like an exposure track, which is basically it tracks whether people are aware of your shifter identity at all. And it can be positive or negative, basically tracking your weirdness a little bit. And that can be a consequence of a struggle, is this exposure mark on your track. And so they have to interact with these people, and they have these NPCs on their sheet that we're tracking stuff with. But if they act too weird, it does have the risk of like causing exposure.
What can happen if that happens?
So it gets pretty interesting, actually. Okay. So whenever you receive exposure as a result of a consequence, or for using powers or abilities, basically what happens is it gets marked onto your sheet as positive or negative. And you track with the town, with your NPCs, and with any animal group. And as these tracks go up, for the most part, it seems very much just like a track going up sometimes, I think, until suddenly you realize you have like 2 left. And whenever you get to the end of the track, there's a resolution, because now the town or that NPC or that animal group knows that you are a shifter. And you do a basically like you roll dice and compare it to a chart, and you can be like known, which is like you're accepted, and they're like, okay, that's weird but cool kind of thing. And then there is revealed, which is where they know but they kind of are cold to you, or are distant with you and maybe don't treat you amazingly well. And then there's reviled, which directs you directly to the violence section, because that is the worst of the reactions that can happen. And when it happens, you go and you resolve it like you resolve any other violence, which violence in turn is a little weird. If it's just like you and one other person, or up to 4 people, or 4 animals, you decide what happens in the scene. You can kill them, you can let them live and know that they might tell other people, pretty much any kind of slang, you define it. But if it's 4 or more people, you choose from a pick list of options. And typically 4 or more armed, or 4 or more toothed beings. You make the choice of whether you will run away and never come back. You sacrifice yourself to save the others, or you kill all of them. And it takes a long time to get to this point. You're not supposed to get to the end of your exposure tracks rapidly. But when you do, it is a pretty serious experience, because it's basically, imagine what would happen if somebody found out that a werewolf was living next door. And if they had all of this negative exposure accrued with you, that means you had done things that had hurt them or people that they cared about throughout the play of the game. And they may have been small slights, but those build up. And whenever you find out that someone's weird and you don't want to like let them go and be doing what they're doing, violence is a potential consequence. And it's scary a bit. My character Beau is actually at like 2 marks to full for the town, and I'm terrified.
because due to the role, you never really know for sure what is going to happen.
Right.
So,
Right. And until you roll, it's up there. You can try and get that maxed out to 10 with pluses, which then you should be fine. But like, if you don't, you have a risk. And that's just the perils of having a big secret and having power of any kind. Like, as much as it's kind of as much as it's kind of scary to think about, like, the shifters in the game seem scary because, at least compared to other things that people think are scary in small towns, they legitimately are dangerous. But only if they choose to be.
That's really interesting. That's some really very interesting emotional stuff. So you mentioned a few times the town manager, which is sort of GM, MC sort of figure. Could you tell us a little bit what is the role of the town manager? What kind of things do they do to influence the story? What tools do they have at their disposal to do it?
Yeah. So the town manager functions in a lot of a stereotypical GM role, I suppose. But they have purposes just like the players do that help guide their behavior and everything. And their focuses are things like making everything's personal to the characters and keeping the characters connected, using status as a leverage, and giving everyone a secret. So they manage the NPCs, basically. Like, the players get to create the ones on their sheets that start the game, but then from that point, the town manager can give them a secret, a fear, and a desire if they so choose to, and if the players don't have those in mind already. And any other NPCs are all created by the town manager, and every NPC has a secret without fail. That's a rule in the game, and that helps to kind of motivate NPCs to do something other than just be there for the players to bounce off of. And a lot of the stuff that the town manager will do is like pacing to ensure that the players encounter challenges and everything that makes sense for them. But they also offer every player and character comfort and success in some moments. Like, that's an important thing. It's to make sure that the world doesn't become too much, and that there still is like a positive experience to be had, because even as players, sometimes we push ourselves and put ourselves in like crappy situations that we don't enjoy. And the town manager is there to say, no, dial it back. How about you have a cup of tea at the diner and like take a break? And so they do a lot of things, like basically guiding scenes to ensure that players can feel like there is friction. They introduce the friction a lot of the time. And they have a series of actions, just like in a lot of other games, where they can give stress or assign exposure, and like change situations on players to keep things interesting and to keep them moving. And they are also responsible for tracking progress bars. So anytime the players have goals that they're trying to achieve, that they keep on coming up with scenes to work on it for, the town manager will put together a progress bar on one of the sheets and monitor that.
Cool. And does the town itself change or evolve in any way through the game?
Yeah, you can add things to the map. We've never had anything go away. I mean, I think in small towns, most things stay forever, no matter how much sometimes people want to get rid of them. But you basically, instead of using a solid line to add an element to the map, you use a dotted line to establish that it's a new thing. And so that's how people can add things like we've added dens for various characters to the map because sometimes those move around throughout the seasons. And like one of the things that we do on our long play game that we've been doing is my character Beau has a truck, and the truck is moved around on the map because we use a digital map. So like he'll be like, there was an entire like extended plot line about how the rumors that kept on coming up at the start of each session, because you do like a rumor phase, like a gossip phase, were that Beau was sleeping with Camellia because his truck was always there because he kept on going there and then turning into a cougar and running off and leaving his truck. And it was Beau's super gay, so it was really like really just a ridiculous experience. He was just like, what? So yeah, like,
but so he could not explain the actual reason,
right? So he was just kind of like, okay, that's happening, I guess. And then her sister came to stay with her temporarily, and then he kept coming over to see Camellia, but her sister was there and left his truck there. So people thought that he was cheating on Camellia with Camelia's sister. It was very silly, and like the rumors can get very like, so dogged because they just people really want to see things happen. So,
well, yeah. That's another thing.
The map can grow.
That's another thing that happens in small towns. Like people need proper entertainment, and there's nothing better than rumors and like stories
right?
like that.
Exactly.
And how did you like make those changes? How is there any mechanic, and how do you add things to the map?
So for direct NPCs, so like ones that we have exposure with, we track their exposure, and kind of narratively represent that story going along with the exposure and everything, and then adding things to the map. And they also come up in rumors a lot. Like, so the gossip phase, it happens at the beginning of every session, and everyone contributes a rumor, and it doesn't have to be about their character. It can be about anything in the town. So like sometimes people would be like, well, everyone's thinking that Lexi is falling in love with Sammy because he was like joined in with her prank last week, kind of thing. And so it's very fluid in a lot of ways, but the rumors do end up like becoming a big impetus a lot of the time for like people doing stuff. And so you mark stuff on the map and you mark exposure with the town and NPCs. But aside from that, there's no big relationship map or anything, because I think it is far more entertaining whenever people have to remember who knows who. Because I've had so many conversations growing up in a small town of, do you know if Benny is dating Casey, or is he dating like Tilly now? And can we try and maybe figure out if they're allowed to be at the same event together, or are they going to like strangle each other? So it's really, it feels very much like that to me, where like, because nothing is like hard written down for relationships beyond the main NPCs, who is connected to who can get very fluid and loosey goosey.
Yeah. Like one of the more typical stuff that they in small towns in Spain is like they always ask you like, who are you from? Like, who's your father? And usually there's like a name, like a surname, a given surname that people give to someone, and they like go down with people like. So yeah, I can see that a lot. And about the characters themselves, how do they change and evolve through the game?
So characters can advance by accomplishing goals. And the goals allow you to choose further powers, abilities, and even additional beast archetypes. So if you start out as like an overachiever otter, you could potentially pick up a like snake as one of your archetypes. whenever you advance. And that way you would have multiple options for your archetype whenever you go into a given scene.
Mm-hmm.
And that can cause some really weird, like, well, which beast me am I putting first kind of thing. But you can also just take enough powers to max out your current archetype. And advances can take a little bit of time. Like, turn is meant to be a longer play game, so it can seem paced out. But it can feel really rich whenever you do accomplish like a human goal or a beast goal that you've been working on. And you also advance with how you interact with your NPCs. As you interact with the NPCs in the town, like how your exposure grows really says a lot about how you, like, the positive or negative nature of it can really say a lot about who you are and like what you're doing in regards to interacting with other people in the community. And there's also a lot of narrative growth. Like, we have characters that have completely flip-flopped on like what they were putting first. Like, one was like totally sure that she knew exactly what it was like to be a beast and shapeshift and everything. And then after seeing some of the other characters around her struggle and having to help them, and then finding the failings in her stuff, you know, like, oh, maybe I didn't know about that as much as I thought. And now I have to like look back at what does being a shifter mean to me. And a lot of it's in introspection. But we talk about it in character a lot, like whenever you're comforting each other and stuff, like those kind of things come to the front of the discussion.
That's really cool. So talking a little bit, and these are like the last few questions. Talking a little bit about the design process, something I'd really like to ask is about some difficulty or hiccup or issue you found in the development of the game, and how did you approach it? How did you solve it? So we all can learn a little bit about that kind of process of fail and trial that goes behind.
Sure. So every one of my design processes is full of kind of ups and downs. I would say I had a lot of trouble trying to figure out the have everyone succeed as a rule thing, because once I made that decision, it made the game feel so much better in play to me and in concept to me. But I also, you know, I had kind of loftier goals for doing it, so like you would advance in a more detailed way, and I had to step back and like be like, what am I really doing here? You know, because it was too much. But like I would say probably, this is going to sound kind of funny, but one of the hardest things is trying to figure out how to explain my games to people. Because the turn doesn't necessarily come through like what everyone expects it to. With like whenever you see the mechanic, like the dice mechanic and stuff, people automatically assume how it's going to play out. And some people have played the game and found that you can't really play it necessarily the way you play other games. And for a long time, I thought that was a failure with my work. But really, it's just in a way of how I tell people to approach the game, you know? That and trying to take on, like, making your own game is really, really hard. Like, I've done smaller games, plenty of them. But as the word count got longer and longer, appropriately and necessarily so, for a turn, I had so many, like, freakouts because I was just like, am I really just wasting my time on this? Like, this is a lot of work for something that might not succeed. But every time I play it, I feel differently. Because while I've reached the stage of design where I think many designers hit, where you're just like, I want to be done with this. Like, I am pretty sick of working on this. I still love playing it. Every time I get to play turn is wonderful. It's one of the only games I GM. like, because it's a nightmare. But it was through a lot of struggle. Like, I've nearly thrown away the game probably 5 times. Because I didn't think it was marketable, or I couldn't figure something out. Like, whenever I struggle with math, I struggle really hard. That's part of the reason why there's so little math in turn. Aside from like 1 + 1 + 1 kind of thing, you know, I whenever I was trying to figure out the dice rolling, like, I was like, do I need to change how many dice I use, or what kind of dice I use, or blah, blah, blah. And then I basically just found somebody had made a probability scale for 2d6, and realized that I didn't want the 2d6 plus the rules that Monster Hearts had. And that's how the stats in turn are absolute value and can be used as a bonus or as a penalty. So like they aren't written as like -1 or +1 or anything. They're written as a regular number, just like 1, 2, 3 or whatever. And you apply them as penalties to the struggles and as bonuses to your abilities and powers. And figuring that out took forever. But once I did, it was like, oh, okay. That's how the game works. And it was like one night I figured it out. And I had like cried and been so upset because I was so stressed out over it. And then I was like, oh, that was... should have just Googled, I guess. But now it's a game. Yeah.
I think many people can definitely relate to those kind of struggles and those kind of frustrations. And to finish up, while you do this, I'm going to like send the links on the chat again for people to see them. But could you tell us? Have you told a little bit already? But could you tell us some cool story that you remember from playing turn that you could share with us? That maybe like there is like a good representation of the game and what do you love about the game?
Oh goodness. So let me see. There are just so many moments that I really loved. I think the best one is so it's very rare to have shapeshifters from out of town, but this story is still one of my favorites. I was playing the long play game we're doing right now with 2 of my friends and my husband running. And my character, Beau, is like a professional hunter and like a cougar, and he's a late bloomer, so he turned late in life. And cougars in the area where we're playing are not super common, because cougars aren't super common, and they're also seen as predators. And there had been evidence of a cougar, so the town brought in a ranger from outside of town, like a park ranger kind of, or state ranger or whatever. And like this guy had been investigating. And at the same time, the animals in the town noticed evidence like of a bear in the area infringing on the cougar Beau's territory. And so Beau was like super mad. And so like Beau started to be upset with the guy who was investigating, the ranger, Ranger Hansen. He was like totally fine, but he was investigating Beau as a cougar, but he didn't know that Beau was a cougar. And it was very like Beau was feeling very freaked out about, so he was doing like all this posturing crap, you know, like in real life, like with his like face-to-face interactions with this guy, like I'm manlier than you are, even though you're 2 foot taller than me, kind of thing. And meanwhile, like his dad is sick, so he's trying to care for him. And his dad's health keeps on getting worse and worse and worse. And then they found evidence of a bear like den that smelled like Ranger Hansen, and Beau just lost his mind. He was just like, oh no, this is not happening on my watch. And he was like, he knows about this and all this stuff. And he went and like ran to go attack him. And at the same time, the other shifters like found out what was happening, that he was going to like go fight him, right? And they showed up and like talked him down. And then they all had steak and salad. like literally, it went from like this like, I'm gonna get a fighting with this guy because he's in my space and I don't like it, and you know, blah blah blah. And then he gets there and like he's like just about to like turn to like attack him, and the guy's like, don't you know that I'm the bear? And everyone was happy. It was really great because like it was a way that everybody got together and stopped people from freaking out and not doing violence because they talked it through and calmed Beau down. And then it turned out that like the big bad wasn't actually a big bad. He was just a guy trying to do his job and was one of them anyway. And that's kind of a lot of the time how like conflict feels, is like sometimes talking down is just what should happen here. And it works really well. We did also have somebody nearly turn into a bison in the mayor's office, though.
That would have been interesting.
Yeah. So there's a lot of great stuff. I honestly would have a hard time choosing a favorite, or even
I don't
even
think
like one that's the best.
Doesn't have to be. Yeah, I think that exemplifies the game perfectly, and I don't think like it's not about picking the best. It's just like telling a cool story. So yeah, for all the spectators out there, if you are interested in this game, which I sure are, and I hope you are as well, I believe it's going to Kickstarter probably on the 31st of October. What's that?
That is the goal. 31st of October. In the meantime, if you keep an eye on my Twitter, the Thoughty Games Twitter, and BrieCS.com, I'll be putting up updates there and announcements whenever it goes live.
Absolutely. I'll leave all the links in the description, so go check it out. And if you like the content we do here on the channel, you can follow us as well here on Twitch, on YouTube when we upload the video, on all the social media with Hijos del Rol. And yeah, I think that's about it for right now. We are going to finish this. Although if you're here in like 20 minutes, are doing a game of Nahual with the author, so stick around as well for that.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's going to be a lot of fun. So yeah, thanks a lot, Brie, for being with us today. It was a lot of fun talking with you.
Thank you so much for having me and asking me questions.
Yeah, it was. I really look forward to playing the game sometime. In fact, I was just thinking, how ready is the game to be played just on the playtest material?
That's what we play on, like using it, and we've had like pretty extensive games at this point.
Cool.
So it's pretty play ready. There's character sheets, and we'll soon have like art and stuff whenever we do the Kickstarter, so that'll be pretty badass.
Nice. Because I do have a convention coming up, which I should have planned like games for it, but I totally haven't. And I'm like, I could play turn. Why not? So yeah. Anyway, thanks everyone. I hope to see you soon in 20 minutes or so. And until then, as I always say, live long and prosper. May the force be with you. I'll see you all soon. Thanks a lot. Bye.